Greetings, everybody. Nick DiVirgilio here, and welcome back to my podcast. So, you want to be a musician? We're at episode number 3, and the guest for this episode is the great Paul Gilbert. I've been honored and lucky enough to be in the band Mr. Big for about a year now as I'm filming this little intro for you. And I got to tell you, it is such a joy to share the stage with Paul each and every night for so many different reasons. Reason number 1, the man is an incredible guitar player. He is a student of that instrument through and through and super dedicated to being the best he can be. He's been practicing and playing since he was a kid, and he probably practices more now than he even did when he was a kid. He's that dedicated to the instrument. He's a great educator. He's got tons of students. I think he told me he's made about 14,000 videos for his students. So he's a great educator, teaching other people how cool it is to play guitar. He's traveled the world over. He's had his own solo career, making all kinds of solo records. He's been in the band Mr. Big, obviously, for a very long time with #1 singles and platinum records and millions of records sold. What else has he done? All kinds of stuff. He's a fantastic drummer, a great singer, writes great songs. The guy can do it all, really. And he knows what it takes to be a musician. He's been in this business for a long time, and he's dealt with all kinds of things, good and bad, high and low, and that's what this podcast is all about, to talk to artists and players about what it means to be a musician. Sometimes it's not that easy. All the glory of being on the road and the accolades and all that kind of stuff, even the money, that's cool. That's really great, but it doesn't just come easily. There's a lot that goes into it. And talking to Paul is a lot of fun because he's got some great stories and shares a lot of great things with us on this podcast. So if you're watching and listening on YouTube, I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on one of the podcast streaming services, follow the podcast. And without further ado, let's get to episode number 3 of So You Want to Be a Musician with Paul Gilbert. All right, we're recording.
All right.
Yeah. Do you want to lead us in with a little something?
Yeah, in the key of C.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Yes.
I'm hoping I'll get in the band with that.
I think you can do it.
Okay.
I think you can. And then you were working on a little riff earlier, like a jazz riff.
Well, I was working on the Beatles.
But
the jazz, the lick.
The jazz lick. I'm sorry.
The lick. So that would, let's see. I'll do the friendly guitar key first.
Okay.
I found if I put my pinky on the root, like, then I can get the proper slide and vibrato at the end.
Okay.
And can you name a song that's got that?
I don't know. Please
because
tell
on
us.
the YouTube video, there's like 1,000 improvised solos.
Right.
But there was a song. It's in "Baby Come Back" by Player.
Okay.
But the one I had got is "Utopia." Walk away. If I Didn't Try, off the Oblivion album.
Okay.
Amazing album. If you haven't heard Oblivion by Utopia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Anyway, thanks for having me here. What are we talking about, Nick?
It's a good way to start. I love it. So, yes, thank you for joining me here on my podcast.
Right on.
We are in Portland, Maine on the Mr. Big tour.
Home of lobster.
Oh, you had lobster today.
I had lobster for lunch, lobster for the pre-show dinner.
Totally. And another great show going to happen tonight.
Absolutely.
We're going to entertain the heck out of the people. And I want to talk to you about the reason I'm doing this podcast is to try and relay messages, especially to younger players and younger folks who think they want to have music be their life's work and their life's dream, of what it's like to be a musician.
Yeah.
Because I think you probably agree with me, it's not always easy being a musician. It's, there
are challenges.
There are challenges, so that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Okay. Hello, young musicians.
Yeah, and it could be older
We're
ones
some
too.
old musicians. We're going to talk to you.
Well, I'm thinking weekend warriors too. It doesn't have to be like full-on pros, but anybody that loves music to the point where they want to do it at a certain level.
They want an inside look at what people like us who are eking out a living.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the first question is a heavy one, and it's super broad, but I think it's a good way. I start everybody with this same question, and then we can kind of go off from there. Do you have to play music to be happy?
Oh, Well, I've never not played it, so I don't know if I know.
That's a good answer.
I mean, before the age of 9, I suppose I didn't play it. I really wanted to, but I couldn't figure out how.
Right.
I just couldn't figure out how to play the instrument. And so I just listened to a lot of music, and I did a lot of air guitar. And I took lessons when I was 6 in hopes that I could start to figure out the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And the lessons were primarily sight reading. And I did not have the patience as a 6-year-old. Plus, I had my instincts told me that for me, that was the wrong sense. You're using your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
The eyes were the long, difficult path to music, where the ears, for me, was a much easier way to connect to music.
Okay.
And that's not how it was being taught. So I quit.
Okay.
Then I took drum lessons, and the drum lessons were also sight reading. Now, I did come away with a little bit of the concepts of
basics,
reading,
right.
but I never got fluent at it. And I remember thinking, well, I'll just come back to it later at some point. I'm 6, I've got time.
Yes.
And then when I was 9, I thought I better start getting on this because
Okay.
time's a wasting.
But you knew at that young age that this was your passion. You loved it.
I was always listening to my parents' records and the radio and I would get together with my friends and we would try to I was sort of the one who would gather everybody together and say, okay, let's write songs, let's have a band.
Right.
None of us could play anything.
Right.
It would just sort of be an unrealistic fantasy. But I remember for my birthday party when I was 4 or 5, I knew who was coming, and I was already writing down who was going to play what.
That's amazing.
And none of them were musicians.
Right.
It was completely based on impossibility, but still that was my dream.
That's cool. So let's fast forward. You play all through your high school years, and then you get your way to Hollywood, and you go to GIT.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this on the bus a little while back, that you were pretty committed, showing up early in the mornings to get the best rehearsal room and all that kind of stuff. So you seemed like you were pretty passionate about it when you took on that.
Well, even before that, when I was in my copy bands in high school or
Right.
junior high, I was always playing with the older kids, and I remember we had a rehearsal place that some nice lady let us rehearse in her basement.
Okay.
And we rehearsed a lot, which is great. I really formed a lot of my abilities from just a lot of rehearsal. But we'd take a break, and the other kids in the band would go upstairs. They'd drink some beers, have some potato chips, talk, and I'd stay down in the basement and keep practicing. And I remember just because I wanted to, I was excited about it because I kept making discoveries, and I could feel that I was improving.
Mm-hmm.
And that I used to fantasize about summer vacation because it was like, oh man, then I can dedicate the whole day to practicing. Where in school, I had to be in school until 3 o'clock in the
Right.
afternoon. So I thought, man, and the reason I fantasized about it was I thought by the end of summer, I'm going to make such a leap forward that was so exciting to me. What am I going to sound like at the end of summer? I just can't wait to be there. So I could really feel the progress. It's almost like looking at a clock, and I could see the hour hand moving.
Wow.
And so that was the exciting thing about it was things were just coming together so quickly for my playing.
Right.
That was an addictive process.
So then I imagine that sort of feeling and that dedication helped you when you went to music school.
Yeah. Well, when I went to music school, first of all, I learned a lot at the school.
Right.
I was mostly self-taught before then. And again, being self-taught, I think I actually learned a lot of valuable things, but things like music theory, that's hard to teach yourself music theory,
Sure.
And just invent that on your own.
Right.
So that was nice to learn at school. And other styles, because I really only listened to rock and heavy metal, and maybe a little bit of blues and some fusion, because I liked Alan Holdsworth in UK. But when I went to school, that really opened up a lot of stuff that, even things that I thought oh, that's a style I don't like. There was country. I was
Right.
oh, I never want to play country. And there was a country teacher, and he played some cool stuff. I mean, actually, it's funny that the opening to "Addicted to That Rush"
Right.
that we open up with every night, that I mean, that lick, to me, that's like kind of country west, a lot of open string.
Sure.
Although that's also very Van Halen. Because I had,
Well, you missed the
Van Halen bootlegs where he's doing like, doing "Somebody Get Me a Doctor," and then he would go. But that's kind of country-ish. You're using the open string to get like a banjo kind of technique or something.
Right.
I mean, I don't know nothing about banjo, so I'm making a guess. But to me, it has a little bit of that character to it.
Sure.
So that really opened up the door, and it was just inspiring to be in a building full of musicians who were into it, and that's always so important. And knowing that we were going to do this podcast, I couldn't help but think like, okay, I know we're going to talk about like advice for the young people,
Right.
And I thought it's really that's maybe the biggest decision, because now with computers, you really can do everything yourself to a much larger extent than you could when we were kids.
Yeah, you had to really find things and discover things.
And so you have that. That's an option. Like, don't involve anybody and just do it all yourself, either programming or overdubs, whatever it is.
Right.
Or the other side of it, do I get other people involved? And that's both of them have upsides and downsides. But to me, that's like the biggest deal.
Right. So, was there ever a point in these early years of you playing music school and being in bands where music and your dedication to it was sort of getting in the way of other things? Like, you were so focused on music, it was people thought you didn't care about other stuff. I mean, did that ever kind of...
Well, I used to use practicing as a way to get out of chores.
Okay.
Because I thought, if my parents just hear me, practicing away, maybe they won't ask me to mow the lawn. And eventually my dad just get pissed off and like, why is the lawn mowed?
Right.
Get out there and mow the lawn.
That's funny.
But I'd always hope, if I just keep playing, maybe I won't have to weed the garden.
Right.
And I don't know whether I would have been a star of the social scene in high school anyway.
Right.
But that was as a 16, 17-year-old in high school. I didn't know. I mean, I was interested in girls.
Right.
But what am I going to do? I have no idea how to approach anybody, how to talk to. Fortunately, I'm married now, but I don't think I still wouldn't. So guitar just sort of gave me something to do, and the fantasy was like, oh, I'll just get so good and successful that'll just solve everything.
Sure.
And a little bit, that it can make things easier to be successful really at anything.
Sure.
And but yeah, I was socially, like I was talking about, the other guys would go up, drink beers.
Right.
I'd stay down and work out whatever I was excited about working on.
Sure.
So I was kind of a loner, but it would never. I mean, I also had the Van Halen interview. I was a big Eddie Van Halen fan, and in his first full-length interview in Guitar Player magazine, which was like a big deal at the time, he was talking about his quote was something like, "Yeah, I had to break up with my girlfriend because I was practicing all the time, and she said, 'You love your guitar more than me,' and he said, 'Yeah, I guess so.'" And I read that as like, well, if Eddie did it,
right,
and I want to sound, I want to be like, I want to go in that, he's like my beacon of that I'm following. I'll do what Eddie does.
So, well, let's go down that road a little bit. So you, in the early days of Mr. Big, you were married. You had a previous marriage, right?
Yeah.
So was the music one of the reasons why that sort of fizzled out? You were so busy.
Just to give you an example.
You don't have to go deep in if you don't want to, but I'm just curious.
Just to give you an example of how much fun I was to be around. Like, we got married, and I think it was either the next day, it was no more than 2 days later that I was back on the road.
Okay.
Without my wife.
Right.
So there was no honeymoon.
Right.
I was supporting the family, and also the management at the time was like, you guys have a hit. You gotta
go.
You gotta take advantage of having this hit. It's never going to happen to you again. So, that was what it was. And yeah, I was just, I was also, at that time, I really wanted to try being a solo artist.
Right.
Because I had more confidence in my singing voice than I probably should have had, or at least let's put it this way, something I wanted to try to see if it was possible. And I think that was the best thing about it, was if I had never tried it, I'd always be wondering, like, what would have happened?
Totally.
So I was like, I've got to just try to see, I got to take a swing.
Right.
So, and at that time, ADATs had come out. So the first time, like, affordable home recording was possible. And I'd bought a house that had room for a studio. Mm-hmm. And so I left the band, and, I'd saved up enough dough to last me a while. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go for it and be a solo artist. And, it ended up being at that time, our career was primarily in Japan. So everything I was doing in Japan. But I remember maybe the moment like that really was just the straw that broke the camel's back for that relationship, was I had a musical goal, like a mission, that was I wanted to play a harpsichord concerto with all the instruments on guitar. Johann Christian Bach. I still remember the phrase. I can't remember now. It's about, I don't know, 8 minutes long or something.
Right.
And I love this classical piece. And I had learned bits of it. In fact, the Racer X song Scarified, which is one of my more popular instrumentals to people who listen to me.
Sure.
That came from me not figuring out that song perfectly. Trying to figure it out.
Right.
And then what I got was it still sounded good.
Sure. Sounds like you still know it pretty well.
So that was my best guess.
Okay.
At one of the parts in the concerto, but it was 8 minutes of that, and a full orchestra, and I remember, I couldn't get the whole thing by ear, especially the orchestral parts. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell. I could tell what the main part was doing, but I couldn't tell what the oboe, in the background. That was too hard to sort out by ear.
Right.
So I had to track down the score. And this is like right when the internet started to be something that, I'd just gotten our first computer, found the internet, you could Google stuff. And so I was like, man, with Google, I can find anything. And it was this mission to find the score. And I was like, monomania trying to locate this thing. It was really hard to find. And I ended up finding it, and then it arrived, and it was the wrong piece, because there's actually two harpsichord concertos in A major by Johann Christian Bach. The wrong one came, and I was just obsessed by it, and I was probably pretty horrible to be around. So, and it's been looking back at it, I think, how important is that piece of music to me now? Is it, the fact that I was able, because I did it.
Right.
I finally found the score, recorded it, and I would say it's not that important to me now. And the reason is it's not something that I can play live. I think that the things that I'm able to play, live without overdubs, those that's the theory. You might ask me in a week, it might be different, but that's my current theory.
What was the point where you and the Mr. Big Boy started getting back together? What brought you guys back together?
Let me try to remember accurately. My first thought, I know. I was doing my solo band, and we were rehearsing at Mates.
Right.
And Pat Torpy, the drummer who you're filling the shoes of right now, he he was always hanging out at Mates. I think he became co-owner of it or something, but that's where he always rehearsed. So he's always hanging out there. And I think he was opening up for, it was Richie Constant and Pat opened up for my show at the House of Blues in LA.
Oh, okay.
And I remember thinking like, well, both Richie and Pat are here. So I invited them to come up on stage for the encore. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what song we did, but we might have done 30 Days in the Hole, like but we did a Mr. Big song, I think.
Okay.
And I think I had invited Billy to the show, and he came up too. So Richie and Pat and Billy all came up for the encore. And it was really exciting.
Okay.
Just the audience just lit up, and it sounded great. And we actually, I remember whatever song was, we rehearsed it at Mates, and that was cool too.
Right.
And we had a good time. It was nice to see everybody.
Right.
And so that was enough time had gone by, and with that experience, it was the first time when I wasn't looking at Mr. Big as like, great music, but I'm just it was the first time when I was kind of looked forward to it with my heart.
Right.
I just as I said heart, I just banged on the microphone because that's next to my heart. Right. It was just a genuine, honest desire to play music with those guys.
Sure. And
so to me, that was the reason to do it, because there were offers before that, like before Richie had joined, they wanted to get back together and do a tour,
right?
And it's a lucrative thing, so
right.
There's a lot of money involved, but my heart wasn't in it.
Okay.
And so when we finally did get together, that was because my heart was in it.
I gotcha. Now, take a step back a little bit. At the heyday of Mr. Big, was the pressure on, well, I'll just talk about you specifically, was the pressure on you in the band because you had the big hit and you were trying to keep it going and doing all the gigs and on the road constantly? Was there a pressure involved with a number one hit, with having that sort of level of popularity?
I was kind of oblivious to it.
Okay.
So there might have been, but I was like everybody in the band had experiences of music, of success in the business way beyond what I had.
Okay.
I had been in racetracks, we were really big in the clubs in LA. We went to sell at the country club for multiple nights,
right?
Which felt great and it was a nice thing. But Billy had done like arena tours, sure, opening for Van Halen. He had done arena tours with David Lee Roth. Pat had done the Robert Plant tour.
Right.
Been on the private jet with Robert Plant. Eric had Herbie Herbert as a manager, and done big shows opening for Journey and stuff. So for me, this is all kind of my first time around doing like the big stuff, being in the big leagues.
Right.
So it was all just sort of a beautiful tornado of things happening.
Right.
And I never really felt in control of it. I just thought, like, try to play good, try to write the best stuff I can,
right,
try to get along with everybody, and what happens.
Gotcha.
It never felt like I really had my hands on the steering wheel.
Okay.
I felt more like, maybe I've got an oar in the back of the ship, but right, I don't know where it's going.
That's funny. So now let's fast forward. You have a son and a new wife. I mean, you've been married for a long time now, who's also a musician. Did that change your perspective on your music and your playing once you kind of got back into a personal relationship and building a family, that kind of thing? Did anything change in your own head?
Well, definitely. The way I work at home is I think hopefully more respectful to the family.
Right.
When I grew up as a kid, the way people use their iPhone now, that's how I used guitar.
Gotcha.
Like every spare moment, I'd be playing guitar. And if the family was watching TV together, I wouldn't have an amp, so hopefully it's not too loud, but I'd be sitting there playing guitar while the family was watching TV. and my first marriage, I was probably doing that same thing.
Right.
Just always, there gets a guitar in every room.
Right.
And, I remember going on a vacation once, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll get a travel guitar. And the look I got, it was it was like, don't you dare bring it up. I got to get away from that stupid thing.
Just for a minute, right?
And so I've adapted to that.
Okay.
It's like there's a time to play music and to work, and there's a time to set it aside.
Mm-hmm.
And when we bought our house, to me that was one of the most important things. It's like the term people use now is the man cave.
Right.
Like, it's very important to have the man cave studio that's like really separated.
Right.
I've got like 2 solid core wooden doors, so it's relatively soundproof. So, when I'm working, and when I come up, I'm not. Upstairs, there's pianos because that's where my wife practices.
Right.
And I might have an acoustic guitar in the corner, but I don't start bringing gear up. That stays downstairs.
Gotcha.
So there's a separation of church and state.
All really cool stuff, man. So if there was something some sort of advice you would impart on to someone whose dream is to play music, to entertain, to be in the arts of some form, and they want to make it their life's work, is there any sort of advice you can impart on them on how to navigate the waters of personal life and professional life?
I'm guessing that it does take some amount of monomania, at least at the beginning, and
Sure.
like the point where you're establishing yourself. And it would be hard to sort of have that balance, a little bit of family, a little bit of music at the beginning. Because at least for me, it did require, I just got to focus on this completely. I need my 8 hours a day to get this rolling. Once it's rolling, and you've sort of established your brand.
Right.
But, you don't necessarily need to be an international touring musician to make a living at it.
Totally. Yeah.
So there's other options. You do your thing. You make your music. It's either a recording, a live show, a lesson, whatever it is that you're doing, and you do it, and then there's a response. If it's a live show, does the audience clap and stay in the room, or do they leave? If it's a recording, do people either buy it or listen to it or like it, whatever it is, right. And that response, in a way, it's hard to predict what it's going to be. And there certainly were times when I was a teenager where the response was disappointing, and I had to kind of believe in myself. I would listen to myself and go, I like the way I sound, so that made me believe it. Okay. And also the other musicians always responded well.
Gotcha.
And that maybe that was the thing. Is like maybe when we'd play a club, like they'd want to hear Creedence Clearwater Revival, and we'd be playing Rush 2112. So the audience would be looking at us like, what is this? This is horrible. But amongst the band members, we were all digging it.
Right.
And so as long as somebody is, you can tell like somebody somewhere is going like, this is cool. Then you've got something. But if that's really not happening and you can't make it happen after a long time, then you've got a hobby that will enrich your life until the end. But as far as like making a living, getting people to pay dollars.
Right.
For what you do, that you need that response. You need to keep people you need to light up the room. Right. If you're doing a live show, and if it's not, it might be something like that was happening to me. It was the wrong material for that audience.
Right.
And so you have to find your audience. And now with social media, are people liking it?
Right.
And so it's so different now with Instagram and stuff that I don't really have a sense of, in a way it's way easier. In a way it's less of the live thing, because that's the thing is like live is so instant. I mean, of course, social media is very fast,
right?
But it's not like I'm playing and the second I play, I see somebody either smile and stay in the room or frown and leave. And I get to see that human being do that rather than like somebody distant pressing a little button.
Right.
So that's, to me, even though it's fast, it's a little more hard to judge.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this. This is a fun talk. I always find it really interesting to hear the perspective of other players, especially players that have reached a level like you have.
Well, right on.
Yeah,
and man, speaking of level you have, thanks for saving the day with this gig.
Oh my gosh, this is a dream come true gig. I'm having a blast.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, man. Would you take us out with a little something?
Yeah, well, one of the things to be a musician, you got to be good at auditioning.
Okay.
And I'm going to play the lick that was my failed audition when I was 12.
Okay.
First good musicians I ever played with, and they said, well, you're 12. Here, learn this song. And it was Bastille Day by Rush.
Oh my, what a song.
Yeah, which 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I could finally get in that band, but I hadn't prepared well enough. So that's the thing. You got to know the songs.
There you go. All right, bud. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Nick.
Well, there you go. Talking with Paul was an absolute blast, and I hope you learned a little something, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you come back in a couple of weeks for episode number 4. I got a great guest lined up for episode number 4. Again, if you're watching and listening on YouTube, thank you. If you're listening on a streaming service, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll see you again for the next episode of So You Want to Be a Musician. Cheers, everybody.